dyslexied it.
We're right there.
I was going to say, yeah, I dyslexied it as soon as you grabbed it. I flunked math. Oh, that's just gave me a heart attack.
That was a fast dental appointment.
What's that?
That was a fast dental appointment.
It's good. So
It's ready for you.
Okay.
I still can't feel anything through here.
It's a good thing the beard covers.
If I look like I have a drinking problem, that's why. I can't feel half my mouth.
Okay, welcome everyone to North Ogden City Council. It's a pleasure to welcome you here this evening. Meeting will now come to order. Make sure you sign in the sign-in sheet as you come in. We need to have that record. Also mute your cell phone so that we don't have any disturbance during our meeting. There have been some mention in the audience that private conversations are somewhat disturbing to them, and so if you do need to have a private conversation, it would be good to go out in the hall and have your conversation, then come back in so that we don't disturb the other group. Well, begin our meeting this evening by an invocation and pledge of allegiance by Council Member Ryan Barker.
Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to gather tonight as a city council and the mayor and citizens of North Ogden that we can discuss items that pertain to our city. We're grateful for the opportunity to help move the city forward. Please bless that we'll be able to make good decisions and that we can do what's best for all the residents. Bless us with all that we need, and these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a couple of presentations that we'd like to make this evening. I don't see the youth council.
Yeah, I'd probably skip them.
Okay. We'll move on to swearing in of a new police officer. We have Officer Mark Steele with us this evening and his lovely wife and two little girls. We're happy to welcome him on the North Ogden Police Force and would like to swear him in at this time, if you would come forward.
Sure.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of the state,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Thank you. I'm going to have you sign this. I just, let's see, I need your signature right there as well. Thank you, Mark. And you're going to want to go shake all the hands of the council.
Thank you. Thanks, officer. Welcome. Thank you.
Welcome again. We're certainly happy to have Officer Steele on our police force and look forward to association with him. Maybe not in some ways, but other ways. Meeting now is open for public comments. You're welcome to come forward at the podium, state your name and address.
Aaron Christensen, 2428 Barker Parkway. Council, if you're getting tired of hearing from me, I will never again be accused of not speaking up. I will continue to be here. I sent a letter to you earlier today, and hopefully you got that in time to read it, regarding the proposed amendment to the noise ordinance at Barker Park. It's a little bit long with some of the research I did on it, and so I need to summarize that just due to time here. But I have to say it's discouraging when the city departments try to justify decisions with partial information that they share with you in their staff reports, in my opinion. I shared with you what I found. I took the list of 36 or so places in the state that do movies in the park. What I found in contacting them and researching them was that they have movies in the park, but of those places cited, many of those locations are not something that even resembles Barker Park or any other park in North Ogden. There are ski resorts, golf courses, sports complexes, and other large facilities that don't immediately impact residential neighborhoods. And so citing places like Snow Basin and the Olympic Oval complex as an argument for starting movies later should be an obvious mismatch to you as a council. Now, on the other side, there are locations cited that do have movies in residential neighborhoods, and many of them do start at dusk or later, and they could be a legitimate comparison if all things were equal. However, a major concern that the city continues to ignore is by building the amphitheater in this residential neighborhood, then allowing 90 dBc, Barker Park has been singled out. Numerous times in construction, it was said that this amphitheater would be unique, and it truly is. We have no other park that combines later hours with louder sound, volume, or whatever you want to call it. It's true also that currently the city can sponsor or co-sponsor events that are allowed to go later than 10 p.m. in other parts of the city, but at no other park is 90 dBc allowed at the property line. So first of all, I would ask that the city, or suggest that the city should play by the same rules as citizens. To think the city is better prepared or equipped and thus more deserving of a later curfew is a dangerous approach, as it becomes subject to the opinion of whomever then holds the rubber stamp of approval in the Parks and Recreation Department. Another thought that you should consider is that if you have a private citizen that has to put their own dollars on the line, they have to plan it out. Okay? And so if something goes wrong, it's their wallet that gets hurt. If our city plans something and it goes wrong, the taxpayers eat it. So, and just for example, I mean, just looking at the amphitheater, we still haven't heard what the plan is for the amphitheater. We don't have parking. We don't have a lot of the other things that these other complexes that I looked at have tons of parking. And so, and frankly, I don't know that it matters parking for movies in the park, because what I see across the street from my house is all the parents dropping off their teenagers who then go over and don't really watch the movie. They just hang out. So parking doesn't seem to be a concern with movies in the park the way it's been done, but it brings up other issues. Second, the sound noise volume, whatever, from my loudspeakers should be regulated the same as the city's. It's the same effect and runs the same risk of being a nuisance, whether it comes from my backyard or the city park in my front yard. Yes, the city's looking into radio broadcasting the movies, but amending the noise ordinance as presented with option 1 tonight opens up additional nights of noise that will not be radio broadcast. In essence, it's a backdoor way to get other events there later because it's sponsored or co-sponsored by the city. Third, I fail to see how noise ordinance regulating noise at one park can set a reasonable limit at 75 dBc at 75 feet from the source and claim that 90 dBc is reasonable at another park at the boundary of that park. I would like to invite you as a council to my front porch to experience 90 dBc at the property line across the street from my house. I haven't heard it yet. I've heard 70. I remember what Battles of the Bands did. And so I would invite you to come out, and rather than throwing out random levels, let's conduct a controlled study and base decisions upon clinical evidence. Try out the radio broadcasting this week. See if it works. Beyond that, please consider leveling the playing field. Give citizens the same rights as the city, as citizens are the city. And treat all of our parks the same. As shown by the city's map presentation tonight, every one of those parks is in a residential neighborhood, and as we grow, every one of them will affect residents nearby. Thank you, Council.
Thank you for your comment.
Excuse me. Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you on the streetscapes that you're going to be sharing tonight, or discussing tonight. As I went through them, I understand transportation is an upcoming issue for this city as more and more people move in, and being able to move those people from A to B and back again is an issue that's going to have to be addressed. But I had a couple of things that really concerned me as I went through this. We talk a lot about doing medians with, pretty grass or flowers or trees or anything like that. And my question is how are we going to maintain those? How are we going to make sure that they aren't used for something other than the medians? To give you an example, while we were in India, they have medians there. And at one point, they did have beautiful flowers. And in talking to some of the council people that were involved in those, they said it was the biggest mistake they ever made. Because what has happened is they now become a place for vagrants to rest, for cows to do their business. Now, of course, we won't have to worry about the cows here, but they are just hard to maintain, is what I was told. Keeping them watered, keeping them green, keeping them beautiful. People use them to cross to the middle of the road. So they rush and they cross to the middle of the road. And then they're stood in the medians. So they're stamping down grass if you've got it put in, if you've got flowers put in. And then they continue on their way. And so I have a concern with medians. I understand the medians serve their purpose like the ones we have right now. And those are great. They serve the purpose they need. So you're not having everybody just kind of coming together at one spot. But as I continued to read through it some more, I started to see a lot of resemblance between that and form-based code, which of course we just voted down, saying that it's not going to work for our city. And I'm worried that streetscape is a different form of form-based code that is not going to work in our city. And so I was looking at goal number 4, which is on page 404, which says, adopt a complete streets policy that will require future improvements to public's right-of-way to accommodate all users, elderly, young bikers, runners, etc., and to increase walkability and bikeability. Sounds reasonable. We do have a lot of aged people that have to walk. But as I started looking down, there was a couple of things that kind of bothered me. It says, develop an approved street tree list and encourage tree planting by blocks, and also to do the same thing in homes. And we hear it all the time. It's their property. When the developers come in and want a rezone, or someone wants a rezone, it's their property. They can do what with it. And now the city is trying to dictate to us what we can actually put in our yards. These trees work the best. Well, it's my property. Maybe I don't like those particular trees. And there is an extensive list. I will say that there is an extensive list. But again, you're dictating what I put into my home. It also says to continue to front single-family homes where appropriate on major collectors and minor arteries, but require alley loading or circular drives or deeper front yards to increase safety and compatibility of such uses. Again, you're telling me how to place my home, what to do with my home. If I just want a regular driveway in that goes straight back to my garage, I should be able to do that. And so as we look at this, I think we need to start remembering those who are already here, who already have their homes. You talk about putting more trees down Washington Boulevard. I thought we had a great number of trees. I love when I'm driving down all the trees that we have in our city. And yet we're talking about more spacing. Do I understand this completely? Of course not. You guys understand it a lot more than me. You've had more opportunity to talk to those that are working there. But as a citizen, it worries me. As I read through all of this, we're starting to dictate what we can and can't do with our homes on the roadways. I understand we have to deal with transportation, and it's going to be a big job for whoever takes over the city council in January. But you know what? Let's be smart about it now and start the right way now, so that by the time whoever comes back, if it's the same council and comes back, then great, they've already done a great job. If it's a whole new council, they don't have to start looking at it and going, oh, wait, you know? So as you consider this, our city is beautiful enough. We have some beautiful parts of our city, and we just need to make sure that we maintain those parts. It talks about putting in sidewalks, but it talks about that being a cost to the residents. Yes, there's a lot of places without sidewalks, but do they need them? Are they required? No. Should we make citizens pay for it? I know how much I had to pay to put in sidewalks and curb and gutter when I bought the home that I'm in right now. So as we go through this, let's think about the citizens that are already here. The ones that are coming in, they won't know any better. But the citizens that are already here need to be treated with respect. And we need to remember that when we start making changes to our system. You know, bike lanes are great, but how are they going to affect our roads? How are they going to affect people coming in and out of their driveways who already live here? So that was just what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, my name is Janae Terry, and I work for Weber Human Services. My address is 2509 West, 5175 South in Roy. I am the Weber's Community That Cares Coalition Coordinator. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but however, we have received a mini grant from Parents Empowered, which, if you're familiar with their campaign, they talk about it's to do with underage drinking, wanting our youth to abstain from drinking because their brains aren't fully developed. But with this mini grant, we have money that we could place, they're called like building wraps, and I have pictures. Can I bring copies to you so you know what I'm talking about, or is that allowed? Is that okay? All right.
Thank you, Janae. We would love to see them.
Thanks. So what we have done in some of our other parks in Weber County is we've put up different wraps on the buildings, just with different messaging in regards to underage drinking. They have lots of different varieties, and we can put whatever messaging actually that we want. But Parents Empowered, they do a really nice job. They're very professional, and they put them up. They don't have to stay forever. You know, we'd like them to stay a little bit of time, but I don't know if that's something that the city would be interested in letting us do in one of the parks. And when I called, they said I should come present to you guys. So I really don't know what I'm doing, but thank you for letting me be here.
So Janae, you're talking about wrapping an entire building?
Or just
One
a
of our
side.
concession buildings?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the whole building, but or just a portion of the building. You know, whatever looks good to you guys. So we have lots of options, and I don't have tons of copies, you know, with me of all the different options. Of course, whoever I would meet with, I would prepare those for that meeting.
Did we get this as an agenda item one evening to discuss?
I think it needs further discussion, but thanks for coming by and presenting it to us.
Hey, you bet.
Okay.
So what do I do from here? Do I wait to hear from somebody, or?
Contact me.
Okay, tell me who you are.
I'm Annette Spendler.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Well, I just want to thank you for this opportunity. My name's Steve Aaron, and I live on 2971 North, 1300 East. I've lived in North Ogden for 35 years, and I love it up here. I just think it's the greatest city in the world. And I have one concern, and it's just a little concern. I was just wondering if it's never been mentioned or not. But when you were coming up 2600 North and you hit 1050, the left turning lane there on 1050, is there any possible way that left turn laning can be moved a little bit more to the right? Because it seems like a lot of people are coming off 1050 trying to turn on to 2600. They cannot do it. They have to wait for all the traffic to be moved away before they can make that right turn right there on that street. Same with buses. They have a difficult time making a turn there without hitting somebody in that left lane. So it's just a thing to look at, and I just wanted to point it out to you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have Public Works take a look at that, also our police department. Thank you.
Melanie Barker, 2524 Barker Parkway. I would just like to share my concerns. I've sent each of you an email last week about the noise ordinance with Barker Park, anything going after 10 o'clock. We were all, I don't know how much we have to say, but please don't change it. It is not a long-standing tradition to have the movies in the park. I remember coming to city council when they stopped the movies because of the kids that were dropped off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and not picked up till after 12:30. They were loitering in our yards, leaving their cigarette butts, everything like that. There's all kinds of inappropriate things down in the hollow after those movies. But the biggest thing is as a neighbor, we get in trouble if we have any noise that bothers the amphitheater. But the amphitheater can do whatever they want in our homes. And I just have great concerns with that noise ordinance. It should not be changed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Sean Casey, 2444 Barker Parkway. Good evening, Mayor. I did a little bit of homework at lunch today relative to the parks in North Ogden. When we build roads, we build 10 to 20 years out. When we do noise ordinances, we should also look 10 to 20 years out. In 10 years out, every park in North Ogden will have at least 100 residents 600 feet from any point in the perimeter of every park in North Ogden, except for Bicentennial Park. Some, such as Barker Park, which is massive by comparison, most of the other parks are 6 to 10, 11 acres. Barker Park, when built out as envisioned back in 2000, 2001 by Mayor Harrop, with such a large perimeter, it's going to have 350 homes within 600 feet of the perimeter of that park. So there are more like me coming. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
Kim Christensen, 2428 North Barker Parkway. I just wanted to add one thought to my husband's thoughts earlier regarding the noise ordinance tonight that you're going to be discussing. If you do decide to amend the ordinance to allow later use, please consider limiting it to movies in the park rather than opening it up to all city-sponsored events. That's just one thought to add to that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, we'll move forward with the agenda. Discussion and or action to consider an amendment to the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. Our presenter will be Evan Nelson, our finance director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are coming to you tonight with some proposed amendments to the current year, fiscal year 2019 budget. Not to be confused with the budget we passed last time, which was for the new fiscal year 2020. So this current fiscal year ends at the end of June, and we have several line items that we'd like to propose to have amendments. So I will just kind of briefly touch on those, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask those questions. First of all is moving $8,500 from the police department salaries line to the police department highway safety wages line. That's for better tracking of grant expenditures. We're proposing $1,000 added to donation revenue and $1,000 added to services not classified for a donation for the Night Out Against Crime event that the police department sponsors. We're also proposing $1,000 be added to the highway safety grant line in the police department because the grant came in higher than we expected. The next item is, so a little background on this one is that the state law regulates how much money can be left in the general fund at the end of the fiscal year. We can only have up to 25% of our budgeted revenues for the next year remaining in the fund balance. So if the city has more money than that limitation, we have to transfer from the general fund over to the capital projects fund. And so we don't always know how the numbers are going to fall because we haven't received all of our revenues by the end of June. And so we're proposing that $1 million be budgeted to be transferred from the general fund into the capital projects fund. We don't anticipate that we will actually need to transfer that much, but we are proposing that in the budget so that we can make sure that we are able to keep the balance within the state threshold. Any questions on that one? Okay. Next is $18,000 of impact fee expenditure being added to the engineering services in the stormwater impact fee fund. And that's to pay for an update to the stormwater impact fee facilities plan. $9,522 added to the capital improvement fund. This is to pay for the settlement in the public works facility property line dispute. We did receive some revenue as part of that settlement. I think it was around $4,000, but our agreement was that we would pay for the installation of, or the moving of the fence, I guess, and $9,500 was what that came to. The next one is $6,000 added to the capital improvement fund to pay for the retaining wall at the skate park. And we're proposing to use fund balance for that. The next one is $12,000 added to the rental property expense line. This is related to the properties the city has acquired for the expansion, or for the widening of 450 East, right? I think I put West here, but 450 East. And rental revenues from those properties would cover that expenditure. The next one is $5,800 added to the police motor pool vehicle maintenance line. This was due to a vehicle accident. The city received a check from the insurance company of the other driver for $4,800, and then $1,000 is our deductible for that. The next one is $17,160 transferred from the RDA fund into the general fund. So the state law, or the state legislature passed a law effective January 1st of this year, where they withhold some of our sales tax money and then they use it to fund homelessness programs at the state level. But as part of that law, they said that we would be allowed to use RDA funds to replenish the money that we would have received in sales tax. So this $17,000 is the amount for the period from January 1st through the end of June. And that's optional. If the council would prefer to leave it in the RDA, you can do that. But we would propose to make the transfer to replace the funds that were lost. The next one is $12,000 for bailiff expenses in the judicial department. This was just a budgeting mistake where we had left that out of the budget, and that transfer from the RDA would be able to cover that expense. The next one is $1,000 added to the police training budget for the police academy. The next one is $4,160 is just being added to general fund balance as excess revenue. then $6,000 moved within the police department to the proper account for purchasing a new copy machine. And then the last one is in the community development area budget. We talked about this project recently, where the city would participate in contributing to an access easement for the development of the Storm Basin project on 2600 North. So it's proposed that the CDA would pay $150,000 for that access easement. The money would be loaned from the RDA fund and then paid back by the CDA when the money becomes available. If you approve that, the CDA would have a total debt to the RDA fund of $550,000. The CDA should be starting to get revenue in the coming fiscal year, and then it should build over the course of time. So that's the proposal, and we expect that the debt would be able to be paid off. So those are the amendments that staff would like to propose to you, and we've provided a resolution. I covered the amendments related to the CDA and the RDA. Those amendments will be considered in the redevelopment agency meeting, which we'll get to that. But we have an ordinance for the city budget and a separate ordinance for the RDA budget. And we'll need to have a public hearing. But do you have any questions on any of those?
There. On the, sorry, I have dental stuff floating around in my mouth. Darn dentists. The bailiff coming from the RDA, how does that happen?
So the RDA funds are replenishing the sales tax funds that were taken from the state. Okay. So that money becomes general fund revenue.
Okay.
And so it was just the timing of it, I guess, that made it convenient to use those funds, because we're amending the budget to increase revenue in that case. In the past, we had been tracking bailiff expenses within the police department's salary line, and the police chief felt like it made more sense for that to be an expense of the court, and so we've made that shift. But in the budget process, when we were trying to make that shift, we mistakenly left it out of the total budget for either department. So
this is a result then of what the state did for the homeless problem. Take withholding a certain amount of sales tax that can be replenished by the RDA. Is that correct?
That's correct. What they're doing at the state has nothing to do with how we track bailiff expenses, though.
I'm just talking about RDA funds being used to cover those bailiff expenses.
Right.
That's because of what the state did.
Right.
Okay.
And I think what Evan's trying to say is the state allows us to use the RDA funds to replenish the general fund, and because there's now an increase of $17,000, we can show that as the way that we're paying for the $12,000 for bailiff.
Right.
So it's not straight across; it's going into the general fund, which then can be spent on general fund expenses.
Evan, will you explain a little bit clearer for me the budget to allow the CDA contribution for the access easement? $150,000 to create an easement?
I think John might have more knowledge on that project. Do you mind?
So this is that agreement we looked at last week or 2 weeks ago for the property behind the Walgreens and America First.
Okay.
And so that property in particular is kind of one of the major funding components for the CDA. So the idea is if that project gets going sooner, we have to start collecting our tax increment this year. So it'll put more money into that CDA fund to pay this back, as well as provide access to that detention basin parcel as part of a guaranteed access, so that property now has two guaranteed accesses, one to 300 East, the new road, and then one to 2550, because UDOT will not give us an access to 2700. So,
Thank you. I remember us talking about that last week. I just didn't know if that was the same thing.
yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? If not, the public is free to ask questions regarding the amendments to the budget. Seeing none, we'll move on to discussion or action to consider an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. Do we have ordinance number?
2019-11.
Mayor, I make a motion we approve ordinance 2019-11, amendment to the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget.
It's been moved by Councilman Barker to amend the fiscal year budget with an ordinance 2019-11.
Second.
And second by Councilwoman Stoker. Any other discussion or questions? If not, we'll begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severine.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. We'll now entertain a motion to recess the regular meeting and convene in the redevelopment agency meeting.
So moved.
It's been moved that we recess the regular meeting and convene in the redevelopment agency meeting.
Second.
The second by Councilman Barker. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Proceeding then with the RDA agenda, discussion or action to consider an amendment to the fiscal year 2018-2019 redevelopment agency budget. Presenter will be Evan Nelson, our finance director.
So this is just for those amendments that pertain to the RDA and the CDA funds. Specifically is the transfer that we talked about to replenish sales tax in the amount of $17,160, and then the $150,000 from the CDA that would be contributed to that project that we discussed.
Questions from the council? We then open up for public comment regarding this particular item. Seeing none, no discussion or action to consider ordinance to amend fiscal year 2018-2019 redevelopment agency budget.
RDA 2019-11.
And I'll move that we approve RDA 2019-11, approving the amendments to fiscal year 2018-19 RDA budget.
It's been moved by Councilman Swanson to consider the ordinance 2019-11 to amend the fiscal year budget for RDA redevelopment agency budget.
Second.
It's been seconded. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, we begin the voting then with Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. I now entertain a motion to adjourn the RDA meeting and reconvene in regular city council meeting.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilman Barker to adjourn
Second.
the RDA meeting and reconvene in regular city council meeting. It's been seconded by Councilman Swanson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 6 on the active agenda is discussion or action to consider resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule. Presenter will be Evan Nelson, our finance director.
So each year we review the consolidated fee schedule and propose amendments that seem appropriate. We generally do that right at the end of the fiscal year for the upcoming new fiscal year. Sometimes we'll also propose amendments throughout the year as may be needed. So we have several changes to propose to the council that are outlined in the staff report. First of all, we'll talk about a couple of changes for the planning department. We're proposing a couple of reductions in fees there because of some changes where we've hired an engineer in-house and changed a little bit of the processes for these. So the proposal is to reduce the fee for minor subdivisions that do not require a technical review from $750 to $500. And then we're also proposing to reduce the boundary line adjustment fee from $350 to $200.
John, do you have that on the screen available? Thanks.
We also have several fee changes related to the animal control department. Let me get to that page. So the animal control department has reviewed their fees and proposed some changes. Some of it is minor. For example, the expired dog license, we've just added some wording to clarify that that's also a fee for unlicensed dogs. We've added some fees for second and third offenses into the fee schedule so that repeat offenders would have a higher penalty to try to encourage those problem dog owners to be a little more responsible. We've eliminated a couple of fees that are services that our animal shelter does not provide, like livestock boarding. We don't do that. So those are the animal control fees. Now in Public Works, as we've gone through the budget process, we've talked quite a bit about utility rates, and we have shown you the proposed utility rate increases. John, if you don't mind bringing up that presentation, I think that'll help at this point. Go to the next slide. So this shows the proposed utility rate increases. These are proposed increases to the base utility rates, and the total comes out at $2.86 per month per account. So those are the rates that we have talked about as we reviewed budgets, and those increases have been incorporated into the budget that was approved. So hopefully at this point you're feeling comfortable with those increases. We'd like to talk about increases to non-residential rates. We've discussed this, not in great detail, but would like to go into a little bit of detail on these now. So go to the next slide, John. This slide is to help show some of the logic behind what we're talking about. So customer A on this table is a typical residential customer, and customer B would be a typical commercial or other type of institutional user. So when the city increases utility rates, historically, we usually increase the base rate by $1 or $2, or maybe it's even less than $1. And so that increase, in this case, we're showing an increase of $6.32. I think that's a combination of several years of increases. So over the course of those years, customer A sees a 25% increase to their utility bill. Customer B only sees a 4% increase to their utility bill. and it's because of the usage. But what the result is that we're shifting more of the burden of the expense of these funds onto the residential users. And so we felt like we ought to do something to address this so that those larger customers or higher user customers would pay their fair share of the burden that comes through the increasing rates. So that's some of the logic. So let's go to the next slide. When we talked with you about modifying the non-residential rates, we brought these 3 considerations to you and kind of talked through those a little bit. Since we had that discussion with the council, staff has done some more analysis and evaluation on these. There's merit in all of them. We had some trouble with number 1 because of the way that our rates are applied to multifamily housing units. And we couldn't find a very convenient way of making number 1 work for our current rate structure. We feel like it's a valid consideration, but it was going to be a significant change, and it was going to be fairly technical. And so at this point, we felt like we would table that consideration, or we would recommend tabling that one, and focus on consideration 2 and consideration number 3. So let's go to the next slide. So this is consideration number 2, and the idea, well, let me explain first. In our current rate structure, residential users pay for their water, or they're billed for their water based on their usage. And the billing is based on that table on the left side, where we pay $1.62 per 1,000 gallons up to 6,000 gallons. And then it increases according to how much you use. So once you get over 19,000 gallons, the customer would pay $4.62 per 1,000 for anything above 19,000. So that the rate is tiered in a way that encourages conservation of water. And that current rate structure is only applied to residential users in our current fee schedule. Non-residential users pay the $1.62 per 1,000, regardless of how many thousands they use. So that's the way things currently are. And so the proposal is that we change that so that all users would be subject to the same tiers. So part of the reason for this also is there was actually a change in the state law back in 2016 that requires retail water providers to establish an increasing rate structure for culinary water. And so we've done that for our residential users, but for some reason it was never applied to the non-residential users. So we feel like making this change will bring us more into compliance with what the state law says. The table on the right side shows you the effect of putting non-residential users on the same tier that residential users are on. The column on the left shows some sample non-residential customers and the amount of gallons that they use. And then it shows what their current fee is and the proposed fee if they were under the tiered rates, and then what the increase would be. So you can see for the high users, it's a pretty substantial increase. 164,000 gallons is a lot of water. Currently, we would charge $265 for that, but under the new proposal, it would be $725 for that sort of use. So I don't want to sugarcoat this. That's a pretty significant increase, but it's putting those users under the same system that our residents are under. Most residents don't use 164,000 gallons, however. So, can we have some discussion about that? The next subject is related to sewer rates, so it would probably be good to talk about this one if you want to talk about it before we move on to the sewer rates.
What was the third consideration again?
The third consideration is the commercial sewer rates. So residents
Oh,
pay.
that's sewer rate. Sorry, I was reading that as water. Never mind.
Okay.
Never mind. Go back.
Do you have any comments about this water rate proposal? Just so you know, when we talk about non-residential rates, we're talking about businesses, schools, churches, government buildings, everything except homes, basically.
I like it. I think it's appropriate.
It would also provide the funding to replace the big meters and this type of thing that we utilize the residential rates for as well, replacing infrastructure. This would help replace the infrastructure for businesses as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. Mayor and I talked about that earlier today, and I forgot to mention that. So when a customer connects to the city water system, they pay a connection fee, and we install a meter and get them all set up. But eventually those meters have to be replaced. And customers who use a lot of water generally have a larger water meter, and the larger water meters can cost thousands of dollars as opposed to hundreds of dollars for a residential meter. So there is some logic for the higher users to pay more, so that when the time comes for their meter to be replaced, the money will be available to do that. The city pays for that. We don't bill people when their meter needs to be replaced. We just incorporate that into their user fees, and then it's part of the city infrastructure.
Any more questions on the water? If not, you can move on to sewer.
Okay. So the third consideration. Okay, so when we talk about sewer rates, residential sewer rates are flat. It's just a flat fee. Every home pays a monthly fee for their sewer usage. But when it comes to non-residential users,
Oh, we need a new slide. Is that the sewer?
That's
Oh,
the
it is
sewer one.
that is the sewer.
Okay.
Non-residential users are charged a sewer fee based on their water consumption, with the assumption that a lot of the water they use ends up in the sewer system. So the sewer rate for non-residential already has a tier. You can see the current rates are in that blue column. And the logic that we talked about, where we increase the base rate every year without touching the usage rates, shifts the burden more toward residential users. So we felt like it would make sense to also increase the usage rates on these tiers. So we added 25 cents to each tier to get to those proposed rates. And then again, we plugged in those numbers so you could see how those increases would affect some of the non-residential customers with different amounts of usage. So for a customer that uses 71,000 gallons in a month, they would have an increase of $18.93 to their sewer bill. So when it comes to sewer rates also, we're part of the sewer district, and every year they basically tell us what we're going to pay them for processing our sewage waste. We don't really have control over what they charge us, other than we have our mayor on their board. But they basically do a calculation and give us our rates. And then historically, we have just done a math equation and spread that increase out across all users. All users get the same increase to their fee. But I think this is a little bit more fair, that the larger users would also have a more sizable increase in addition to that base rate. So.
Makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. So what we would propose is adopting the resolution for the amended fee schedule, if you're ready to do that.
The resolution number.
03, 2019.
Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt the resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule, and the number is 03-2019.
Been moved that we consider the resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule 03-2019 for approval.
Second.
It's seconded by Councilman Barker. Any other questions or discussion? We'll begin the voting then with Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Item 6, discussion or action to consider amendment to the noise ordinance for movies in the park. Presenter will be John Call, our city manager, attorney.
So, council, this will be a little more interactive presentation than normal. We have found a provider of what you could call a silent movie. So I had asked you to all bring your earphones today. If you could download the app on your phones while I start this conversation, then we can kind of give you an example, and as well as anyone in the audience who wants to can also download the app. But this is the type of a device that could be used for doing a quiet movies in the park, which would be allowed under option 2 of the ordinance that's been presented to you. In working on this ordinance, staff went and brought back some more information the council had asked. One of the things we were asked about was which park might be best suited for this type of a program, something that we've done in the city for some years off and on, but fairly consistently as we've spread it around the parks for the past 10 plus years. This table here in the staff report identifies proximity of homes compared to the location of where the screen would be in the park. That location was selected based on availability of power and other things like that. You can see no park is completely away from homes, as was identified earlier. Every park is going to have homes within 600 feet of it. In fact, the park that has the furthest homes is in this 351 to 400 foot category, and that is Barker Park. That's the one that we're still thinking as staff works best for this type of a program. We did go and also look at the various communities that are doing movies in the park. It sounds like there's been some other information provided, during public comments about these facilities. We didn't do an in-depth analysis of each facility and its proximity to homes or things like that, other than some personal experience on proximity to homes on some of the parks that we've been to. But we didn't do enough of an analysis there to strictly because of the time it would have taken to get ready that type of information. there are quite a few communities who, unless they have an LED screen, they typically do have to start at dusk. So regardless of proximity to homes, they do typically start at later at night because of the projection requirements. But also in relation to that, we, went through to try and find this provider for this silent movie option, as the council had asked us to kind of look at this as maybe a good compromise on this. This type of device is not well suited for some types of activities, but for parks or for movies in the park it might work, but it will exclude some people. A good example is people with young kids would probably have a hard time keeping earphones on their kids for 2 hours at a time, or they might not have enough devices for each kid to have their own device. We do have the opportunity or the chance to provide splitters, so that people could plug into their device a thing that splits the signal into 5 or 6 different loops, so that people can plug their headphones in and they can share one device. But still, for the younger, 2-3 years old, that's not going to work as well. Have you all downloaded the app? Okay, let me pull this back up. So now, on your phones, you have to disconnect from whatever Wi-Fi you're currently talking to and connect to either this Barker Park Audio or the Barker Park Audio 5. The 5 is the 5 gigahertz signal, and the other one's the 2.4 or 2.5 signal. Either one will work, and then the password is movies in the park, or movies in park. And let me know when you're all ready. Do any of you have any questions up to this point? And Tiffany's here and has done most of the legwork on this. We've worked together on the staff report, but she understands and has been involved in the Movies in the Park program much longer than I have.
Go. Yeah. You have headphones.
And you aren't required to put your headphones on. It'll play through the speaker on your phone as well. Other than with the council, it'll feedback through the microphones quite a bit. And the way this ordinance is currently written, we wouldn't allow people to use speakers. They would have to be using earphones, at least as far as the option 2 is. And looks like several of you are ready. It might be. Oh, sorry. I think my phone was muted.
Is that it? Because my phone's doing some funny stuff.
You haven't heard this song before?
Oh, I was going to say, is that what you're really doing?
I'm not hearing anything.
Well, I can't even get into my phone, but it's playing. I like it.
I'm showing channel 1.
Yeah, it should be on channel 1.
Okay.
Did you turn up your sound there in the center?
It's way high.
That's weird music.
You've never heard the song?
Who's it from?
Did you connect the Wi-Fi movies in?
People with little kids know this song. Yeah.
But, so one of the things that'll be a steep learning curve with this type of an approach is making sure people are connected. I'm going to pause it so that it doesn't. But it's it's a little bit of a process. The people who come back for the second or third shows would obviously be able to, they'd know what they were doing. They'd be able to plan for it. We still haven't been able to, we just got the device today and we haven't been able to run a test to see how much battery power it'll drain. For a 2-hour show, if most phones can handle supporting the app the whole time. The wireless signal this is using, it doesn't connect to the internet. And that's intentional because we don't want people using the wireless to connect to the internet and use up the bandwidth that we need for the audio. But that's the type of thing that's an option under this option 2 in the ordinance. The language that's specifically been presented in the ordinance is essentially these two options. One just simply allows the city-sponsored events to go till 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, and as well as the corresponding 4th of July fireworks show. Option 2 allows the same thing, but it requires that loudspeakers be turned off by 10 p.m., which is considering the noise option. Option 1 is closer to what currently occurs in all the other parks if we have another event. We do have a provision, as was stated earlier, that allows for city-sponsored events to operate past the park closing hours. And in that same ordinance, there's a provision about noise. It restricts the decibel level at property line, as was also mentioned tonight as well. But we've kind of been, I guess the hope or the goal from this discussion this evening is to find out whether or not we can show our movies in the park on Friday and try this system or another system, just an audio broadcast like we've done in the past. We canceled our last event, our last movies in the park. This Friday, I believe we're showing Mary Poppins Returns. Is that right, Tiffany? It's How to Train Your Dragon 2 or 3 or what questions do you have for me? Tiffany, do you have anything you want to add or okay? Do you want the audio back on, Phil? See if it'll work.
I have yet to hear anything. Oh, there it goes.
Yeah. So it takes just a little bit of.
You listen to this regularly?
I've probably heard it more than I should have in my life. Yeah. But the way that it'll be a little bit finicky. Right now we have 3 devices that we use to run movies in the park: a projector, a DVD player, and speakers. This will add a couple more components into that system, and there's a high likelihood of failure, which could cause some issues. We'd hate to start an event and have it cancel mid-event because something went down. Although, I've been in movie theaters before when the power went out, and you just kind of deal with it. But really, it's kind of up to the council. One other option we have as well is to put a sunset clause on this ordinance that essentially says within, it'll be this way for till December, and then we'll have to revisit it for next year before we move forward next year. The software, the apps are free to download. There's no monthly charge for this audio fetch group. You just buy the little device. It's about it's about the size of a cigarette carton. I'm not sure how many of you know how big a cigarette carton is, but
why do you know?
Working in convenience stores. But it's so it's fairly easy to transport. Staff's preference would still be to use loudspeakers to include everybody. And the nice thing is that if we started at dusk, as the summer progresses on, we can start earlier and earlier. We've talked about coordinating our movie times so that we show the shorter movies in the middle of the summer and the longer movies towards the end, so that we're not bleeding past that 10 p.m. mark as much. Because by mid-August, sunrise, or sunset gets progressively closer or earlier in the evening. So, what questions do you have, council, or what are your thoughts?
I've been thinking about this and went through it. I think right now, the way our ordinances are written, you could do movies in the park with this at a different park. Because as you said in our staff report, any other park, you can go till 11 o'clock. Is that correct?
It actually doesn't have an ending time. It just says.
I thought it said 11. That's all right.
But it's a city-sponsored event, and
Because I would like to see how it works without writing a whole new ordinance and then have a sunset clause when we take it out later in the future. I kind of like to see how it works where we don't have to change anything. I know we'd have to change the date or the address on the flyer to go to a different park, but if we went to a different park and tried it out the first 2 times, we'd still be in that 30-day trial. That's my recommendation, or my thoughts.
Park you suggesting?
Well, I'm not right now. Our ordinance says any other park except Barker Park.
Well, it just says parks, and then there's the amphitheater ordinance restricts
Right.
it better, yeah.
Yeah.
Or more.
No, like I've said before, we can try it at Mountain View.
But I think where we have an option where we don't have to put in a new ordinance even with the sunset clause and take it out, let's look at it, see how it works, and then come back and talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
Can I ask the question? I'm kind of curious. It seems kind of pricey to be able to, under movie in the park research, we have looked into renting a screen for our movies in the park. It would be $2,500 for a lower resolution screen for a one-time use, or $3,500 for the higher resolution screen.
So that's if we were starting at 7:30 and using an LED screen. Staff doesn't think that's a good option because of the cost to rent the screen. The 2 facilities who rent screens rent them for the whole season, and so their cost per use is much lower because there's not a delivery fee and things like that. But that it would cost us $2,500 to $3,500 for a screen for just one evening.
So do we really find that the movies in the park is something that we get kind of a bang for the buck in anyway? What does it cost us to get these kinds of movies? And I mean, I'm a little sensitive to the idea that if it just kind of becomes a